afternoon and welcome back to Football League World TV. We've got another debate show this afternoon where we're going to be discussing Derby County heading into the January transfer window and whether or not we're going to see a mass exodus of players at Pride Park in the new year. Joining me and my colleagues Toby and Chris. Toby, how are you getting on this afternoon?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Obviously, I won't necessarily say I'm looking forward to this one because obviously it's not the most cheerful of topics for Derby fans, but it should certainly be interesting to sort of run the rule over a number of the players and their sort of own situations at the club at the minute.
Absolutely. Chris, how are you?
Yeah, well, good, thanks. Just seeing what games we can have this weekend. It's not looking good, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a completely separate debate show that we could have definitely on the state of the fixture list at the moment. Right, we'll get straight into it. Right, first up, we're just going to run through Wayne Rooney and what he said so far on transfers and the players that are at Derby at this moment in time. Earlier in the month, he was quoted as saying, "I could potentially lose players in January. Not through having to sell them, the administrators tell me that, but they could go and sign for teams abroad. Once that happens, it is out of your control. I want someone I can really ask the questions to give. Can I give this player a new contract? Can I bring this player in? Really, I've got nobody I can go to." Of course, he's discussing the fact that there's no ownership at Derby at the minute and they're being placed in the hands of the administrators. Toby, first of all, how concerning are Rooney's comments really on transfers and the situation at Derby?
Yeah, I think that's a big concern for a number of reasons. Obviously, the fact that he's talking about losing players is going to be a massive blow when you look at sort of the size of the squad at the minute anyway. But sort of the nature of seeing them go abroad, there's the issue there of if they are going to do that, then the chances are it could be done on pre-contracts next month. And that obviously means the club will be missing out on a good deal of funds that could be absolutely vital in terms of keeping them going at the minute, seeing them through to the season and beyond whilst they're looking for a new owner. And then I think as well, sort of you listen to almost the tone that Rooney's putting across there, it sounds like there's perhaps maybe a little bit of frustration growing on his part. And I mean, with all he's done to sort of keep the club going and all the work he's put in, you couldn't blame him for that. So whether you start to worry a bit about how he's feeling in terms of his own personal situation at the club, that's not perhaps the most encouraging things for Derby to hear in that sense either. I mean, he's done wonders for them, of course. And, you know, clubs, obviously we've seen the Everton links. I think he's played them down in his press conference today, but nevertheless, they are there and other clubs might start to, develop a bit of attention towards that. And that's going to be a concern as well, given what a good job he's done for Derby in the circumstances.
Any Derby fans joining us this afternoon, get yourselves in the comments. We want to hear from you. Anything on what Rooney's had to say on the players that you think might leave in January and just the club situation in general. You know, Toby's mentioned Rooney's held his press conference this afternoon ahead of their game against Cardiff at the weekend. He's discussed the takeover. He thinks a preferred bidder will be decided by the administrators by Christmas. Chris, is sort of this player uncertainty and what's going to happen in January one of the sort of factors that the administrators have to take into consideration and hurry through this takeover at the minute?
Well, I think you'd like to think so from a fan's perspective because, as you said, it's just uncertainty around everything. But I suppose they've got to look at the bigger picture. They won't really care about one January transfer window. It's about sorting Derby's future. So I think we can all say we want them to do this, or they hopefully will do it. But it's going to happen when it happens, really. And obviously, it's been dragging on for a while now. So you would hope that it's just around the corner. But we've said that quite a while, haven't we, with Derby in the past, and something just seems to be another obstacle that comes up or something else happens. But now it does look as though a preferred bidder will be named, and then hopefully it can develop quickly from there. But yeah, I think ideally you'd want it for January, but I think they've got to look at the bigger picture here, and it's about Derby's future, and then it's looking long term, really.
Of course, administration has left Derby rooted to the bottom of the championship table as things stand. But, you know, as results show that they are, you know, the league table doesn't tell the whole picture when it comes to Derby. They've got some really talented players who we're going to get into next. And given the club's precarious situation at the minute off field, there's been so much speculation about who will and who will not be moving in January. We're going to start, you know, with the main man in the squad, really, in Tom Lawrence. He's the captain, 5 goals and 3 assists this season. The Mail report, the Derby could let him leave for free to cut costs. There's been different noises for Rooney on that rumour. Toby, what kind of blow would it be to lose somebody of Tom Lawrence's calibre for Derby in the January transfer window?
Oh, be a massive blow. As you say, he is the main man. I think you go back to sort of games like the Bournemouth one, or even in defeat the QPR game, the quality that he brings to that side with his finishing ability and his all round play is massive. I mean, he's the captain as well. He has sort of taken on that leadership role. So I think in that sense as well, with a young side losing a play, not just with that experience, but that presence. I mean, he is potentially one who's having to help guide some of these younger players through what's a really difficult sort of situation that they find themselves in. So for a number of reasons, it would be a huge blow to Derby, and I think perhaps the way he's sort of maybe dealing with that experience and stepping up now for Derby and coming up with some really big moments for them is perhaps maybe one of the reasons why this sort of interest in him is starting to grow a bit.
And what about you, Chris? Where could you see Lawrence potentially going if he was to leave in January? Do you think he's good enough for the Premier League, or do you think it would just be sort of the top end of the Championship he could end up?
I think he could get in January. Teams often panic. I wouldn't be surprised if a low-end Premier League club took him up on because of the no costs, no fee up front. So, yeah, I think he could do that. I'd say his level is a top-end Championship club. But yeah, he's 27. He's been versatile as well this season, playing different positions. And as we've said, he's contributing for what is a pretty poor side in the Championship. So yeah, I think he'll be coming up with his contract running down. He'll have a lot of options on the table, I'd imagine.
Yeah, something to watch there, definitely, with Tom Lawrence. We're going to dive into a different sort of area of the squad next. There's so many good young players on the books at Derby at the minute, and the first one we're going to talk about is Jason Knight, the 20-year-old. He's a massive talent. He's been linked with West Ham recently. This is a different type of potential departure at Derby in terms of comparing Knight and Lawrence, given Lawrence is the captain and that kind of thing, and Knight's more of an upcoming talent. Toby, it's equally as concerning though, isn't it?
Yeah, massively, because as you say, he might be an upcoming talent, but he's developed into a really big figure for Derby in the centre of the park. I mean, he's only 20 years old and he's already coming close to 100 appearances for Derby. So that sort of shows almost how he's developed, how he's sort of almost, because of maybe the situation they found themselves in, it's given him an opportunity there that he might not have otherwise got, and he's really taken it with both hands in terms of becoming a pretty integral figure for the Rams. And I think that sort of shows with the with that sort of interest coming from a club in the sort of size and the position that West Ham are in. And obviously that'll be a hugely frustrating blow for Derby, not just losing a player with that ability, but losing him so early in his career when he has the potential to sort of even go on, develop and improve and possibly become an even better player in the future when they could have potentially even got even more money for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And elsewhere in the squad, Lee Buchanan's another real bright spark, a good young player. He's reportedly on Celtic's radar. Chris, is this one that Rooney maybe is mentioning with an eye on pre-contract agreements and that kind of thing?
Yeah, it probably is, because as we know, Celtic could make contact from the start of January. So yeah, that would be a worry. And just the young players in general, because they've got, as you've said, they've got a lot of talent, and they're the ones that Derby are going to want to build the future around. There's a kind of an inevitability that Lawrence is going to go with his contract up, but it's these young players, especially Buchanan's obviously not, but the other ones that are contracted, they're the ones you want to keep, extend, and build the team around moving forward. So yeah, I've got to say Rooney and all Derby fans will be worried about this situation. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sort of the ones that are really being linked away now are Knight and Buchanan. But in previous transfer windows, we've seen Max Bird being linked with the Premier League. Louis Sibley, I know for a long time it was linked that he'd be moving to Leeds at some point. With the other two sort of more speculation surrounding them, Toby, do you think that Bird and Sibley are potentially two that Derby can look to hold on to?
Yeah, I mean, the fact is they are going to have to keep some elements of their squad together, regardless of the fact they maybe do need to move players on to bring some funds in. There is an element of finding a balance there, and as you say, the talk around say Bird and Sibley does seem to have subsided a bit, and sort of looking at the contract situation at the club, they are two who have sort of got longer on their deals than pretty much anyone else in the squad. Obviously, both contracted until the summer of 2024. So they are sort of one of the small sort of pairs of players that Derby could actually, be in a stronger position with regards to if any offers do come in this summer. And as I say, with the fact that they need to keep some players together to give them some chance of competing, they are sort of two who perhaps stand out as potential ones that they might expect to see at Pride Park beyond next month.
Fingers crossed that Derby can get the sort of takeover in place soon. Chris, do you feel that when the takeover does go through, the one thing that the new owners are going to have to focus on straight away is the situation around all these young players?
Yeah, I'd say that has to be the priority. Because I think realistically, they're obviously going to go down this season. It would be a miracle if they stayed up. So you've got to start thinking about League One, and then even using the rest of this season a chance to decide which young players are going to be part of it. They've got some experience that will help them through the rest of this season, and then you want to have a core set of players that you can look to push for promotion next season with.
Right. Next up, we're going to look at quite a stocked part of the Derby squad and the goalkeepers. There's been plenty of reports around the future of Kelly Roos and David Marshall in recent weeks. Roos has been linked with a move to both Fulham and Bournemouth, currently the Championship's top two, whilst reports in Scotland from earlier today have suggested that Derby want Marshall off the books. Toby, do you feel that these are two players that Derby can maybe afford to lose in the new year?
I think maybe one of them, either or. I think it'd be a risk to lose both of them, because that kind of leaves them with just Ryan Alsop as sort of the only senior goalkeeper there. And, at that point, you are taking a risk, but potentially given, goalkeeper is maybe a position where you are less exposed to the injuries, they might feel that they're better off taking that chance and raising a couple of more funds there than they would do selling off more of their outfield players where they aren't as well stocked in certain positions. And I mean, obviously it's an interesting one. I think Roos in particular, how is he going to want to go? You can see sort of the appeal in terms of going up, but to a side such as Fulham or Bournemouth, when the chance is there to potentially be a Premier League player next season, given their current positions in the Championship, but counteract that with the sort of game time he'd be getting. I mean, Fulham in particular, they've already got Marak Rodak and Paolo Gazzaniga, so it could be hard for him to get into a side there. Bournemouth, there is potentially more opportunities when you look at their current goalkeeping options. So that is one that could potentially be worth keeping an eye on. Marshall as well. I mean, to me, that would make a great deal of sense to move David Marshall on. I mean, he's into the final few months of his contract, so it's their final chance to sort of receive a fee for him. He's a quality goalkeeper, but he's not getting any sort of game time at Derby at the minute, so it makes little sense to be spending any money on his wages for him not to be playing when they're looking at sort of this last few weeks where they might be able to get those all-important funds in for him. And I mean, he's a good enough goalkeeper for teams to be interested in him. Make no bones about that. I mean, it was excellent for them in the Championship last season. He's shown consistently over years he can do that before. Obviously, he's a Scotland international as well, and I think there's talk he perhaps wants to move on, given he's dropped out of the Scotland side, and that getting back to playing regularly is going to be a big chance for him to force his way back into the Scotland team. And what a time to do it with their sort of World Cup playoff coming up in sort of early next year. So Marshall in particular, one that would make sense to move on for me. Roos, potentially a few more question marks about that, given what it would leave them with in terms of moving both on. But again, one they could consider when you compare those goalkeeping options to the rest of the positions in the squad.
Absolutely. I mean, just speculation at the minute, but January's, fast approaching, and we're going to get a little bit more clarity on both these players' futures in the coming weeks. As for Marshall, something that me and you have discussed before, Chris, you're surprised by the fact that he's not played as much for Derby this season.
Yeah, I mean, it would suggest to me that something's going on that we maybe don't know about, whether it's financial part of the contract or whatever. That's in a few rumours, but you obviously don't know the ins and outs. But yeah, I think of the three goalies that Derby have got, I'd say he's quite comfortably the best, as Toby touched on there. He had a good season last season. We all know how well he did for Scotland when they needed him in that penalty shootout. So, yeah, and he's just a good, experienced goalkeeper. And I think with Roos and Alsop, on their day, they can be decent, but there's a lot of mistakes in both of them. So, yeah, I was very surprised that Marshall hasn't been used this season. I'd suggest he could still do a job at Championship level as well.
Right, before we wrap things up, I think it's probably best to debate the position that Derby are going to be in at the end of January. Then, in both your opinions, in terms of their playing squad, Toby, where do you think we're going to be looking at Derby? Who do you think might go? Who do you think they're going to be able to keep hold of?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and I do think it really depends on sort of how the next few weeks play out in terms of sort of finding a new buyer. I mean, I think a couple of weeks ago I was potentially, when it maybe seemed like things had slowed down in the search for sort of a new owner, I thought it could have been pretty much everyone going, because that looked like it might have been the only way for them to bring any sort of money in. But now that there's talk of potentially a preferred bidder by Christmas, I think that does give them a bit more hope. I mean, there's obviously, even if someone does come in, you feel there's going to have to be some players moved on, either for their own good or for the good of the club, in terms of trying to perhaps financially restructure to sort of avoid a situation like this again. So I think, as Chris sort of touched on, maybe Lawrence is one that does seem inevitable to move on. I mean, even with potential new backing, it may just be the case that clubs have been that impressed with him this season that an offer comes in they can't refuse. Marshall as well, it would, as we've touched on, make sense to move him on given his situation. And then against maybe someone like Knight, if that level of interest is there, it could again be hard to keep hold of him. Buchanan depends on who comes in on a pre-contract. I think if a pre-contract doesn't emerge, then that's got to be something they look into a new deal for him to avoid that developing further down the line. So I think there's in short, I think there's more hope now for Derby that they might have some semblance of a senior squad together now than they might have been looking at this, say, a week or two ago.
And what about you, Chris? Where do you think, we're going to go with Derby over the next sort of 6 weeks?
Yeah, so we all hope the takeover does happen, but yeah, I think either way they'll have an eye on next year. I think Rooney will be trying to plan ahead. So yeah, the more experienced higher earners who are running out the last 6 months of their deals, I think they'll be off. So you've got Lawrence again will be the main one. I think for him as well, the chance to move to a top-end Championship club or a low-end Premier League club at his age now, this is what he'll have to take in the new year. And then I think if the takeover does happen, they've got a more chance of keeping hold of the youngsters, and then that will allow Rooney to use the next 3 or 4 months of the season to start planning ahead and building a squad that in his own, the way he wants, because he hasn't had any backing, has he, at all since he's come in. It's been really tough for him. So it'll be like a clean slate for him, and that's what Derby fans have got to hope for. If it continues to drag on and nothing happens, then they are going to be vulnerable for offers for their better younger players. But we obviously hope that isn't the case, and hopefully they get some clarity in the next few weeks.
Absolutely. Derby are definitely going to be a club to keep an eye on during the January transfer window, one way or another. That concludes this afternoon's debate show. Thanks to anybody that's joined us. If you are watching on demand, please do like, subscribe, share the video around everywhere. It is really appreciated. Thanks to Chris and Toby for joining me as well. Tomorrow on Football League World TV, we've got our 2 usual slots. On Friday, we've got the Football League World TV betting show in the morning, and then the EFL weekend preview in the afternoon, where hopefully we'll still have some fixtures to preview. Until then, though, take care.